I am Hilda, 28 years old, and a web designer in Seattle. Despite building my own successful career, I was always the family disappointment. Last year at my father's birthday dinner, surrounded by relatives in that upscale restaurant, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You are the most useless child we have." Mom nodded slightly while my brother smirked. But instead of crying or arguing, I simply smiled, stood up, and walked away into the night. What happened next changed everything. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt unappreciated by the people who should love you most. Growing up in the Anderson household meant one thing above all else. Excellence was expected, not celebrated. My father, Thomas Anderson, was not just any surgeon. He was the surgeon everyone in Seattle wanted when lives hung in the balance. His office walls displayed framed articles from medical journals, community service awards, and photos with important people who sought his expertise. People literally applauded when he entered charity galas. In our neighborhood, being Dr. Anderson's family carried weight that opened doors and raised expectations. My mother, Diana, was cut from the same ambitious cloth. While my father saved lives, she built an empire in real estate. What started as a single-agent operation grew into Anderson Properties, one of the most recognized agencies in the greater Seattle area. She specialized in luxury homes and commercial properties, her sharp business acumen earning her features in business magazines and speaking engagements at industry conferences. Her perfectly maintained appearance and commanding presence intimidated most people, including her own children. Then there was my brother Jackson. 3 years younger than me, but somehow always miles ahead in our parents' eyes. He inherited not just my father's analytical mind, but also his interest in medicine. By the time he was 16, he was already volunteering at the same hospital where my father practiced, shadowing doctors and learning procedures most teenagers could barely pronounce. His acceptance into the same prestigious medical school where my father had studied was treated like a national holiday in our home. A 15-person dinner celebration, gifts, and my father actually shedding tears of pride. Our extended family followed the same pattern of overachievement. My Aunt Margaret, my father's sister, became a federal judge before turning 50. My cousin Patrick launched a tech startup that sold for millions before his 30th birthday. Family reunions felt like networking events where accomplishments were currency, and I somehow always came up short. From my earliest memories, I was different. While Jackson dissected his science kits, I was drawing, painting, and creating. My bedroom walls were covered with art, not academic certificates. I had an eye for color composition and beauty that no one else in my family seemed to understand or value. My sketchbooks were my refuge from a household where MCAT scores and income potential dominated dinner conversations. When college application time came, the expected path was clear: pre-med at my father's alma mater. But I chose differently. I applied to art schools, eventually accepting a scholarship to a well-respected design program. The day I announced my decision remains burned in my memory. My father stared at me as if I had announced plans to join the circus. Art school? What kind of career is that? My mother was more practical but equally dismissive. Honey, that is a hobby, not a profession. They paid for my education, but with frequent reminders of what they considered a wasted opportunity. Your cousin Andrea is finishing medical school this year, my mother would mention during our monthly calls during my college years. Or Jackson is already being courted by research programs, my father would announce, while barely acknowledging my dean's list accomplishments. As family gatherings came and went over the years, a pattern emerged. My achievements were acknowledged with the enthusiasm one might show for a child's refrigerator drawing. When I landed my first design job at a respectable firm, my father asked if it came with health insurance, as if that were the only measure of career success. When I was promoted to senior designer within 2 years, my mother wondered aloud if I would ever make real money. "Have you thought about getting an MBA?" became their standard question, suggesting my creative career was just a phase I would eventually outgrow when reality set in. At every holiday, wedding, or reunion, the subtle put-downs accumulated like small paper cuts. "The Anderson creativity gene," my aunt would say with a laugh, as if my passion was some quirky anomaly in our family's successful genetic coding. "At least she is independent," my mother would tell her friends, the bare minimum of parental pride. Despite their dismissal, I built a career I was proud of. My designs won industry recognition. Companies that even my parents had heard of sought my work. I bought my own condo in a decent Seattle neighborhood without financial help. I created a life that by any reasonable standard would be considered successful. But in the funhouse mirror of my family's expectations, my accomplishments always appeared diminished, warped into something less than they were. And over time, their perspective began to infect my own. I started believing that maybe I was the family disappointment. The anxiety before any family gathering became almost unbearable. I would prepare for days rehearsing descriptions of my work in terms they might value, only to have those accomplishments brushed aside for more updates about Jackson or my cousins. Each dismissal chipped away at my sense of worth until I began to wonder if they were right. Maybe designing websites, creating brand identities, and building visual communication systems was less valuable than what the rest of my family contributed to the world. Maybe I really was the underachiever they seemed to think I was. By my late 20s, I was successful by most standards, but still seeking the approval that never came. Each new client, each award, each professional milestone became not a cause for personal celebration, but another attempt to finally earn my place as a worthy Anderson. I lived for the day they would look at me with the same pride they showed Jackson. That pursuit led me to my breaking point at my father's 60th birthday dinner, where everything finally changed. My father always preferred celebrating his birthdays at Maison Laurent, a French restaurant with crisp white tablecloths, crystal glasses that sang when touched, and waitstaff who moved like shadows between tables. The kind of place where meals were experiences and bills required a second glance to confirm the number of zeros. For his 60th, he had reserved the private dining room overlooking the water. I arrived 30 minutes early, wanting a moment to gather myself before the family descended. I had chosen my outfit with painful precision, a sleek black dress that communicated success without trying too hard. Paired with the single designer piece I owned, a handbag I had saved 3 months to purchase. My hair was freshly cut, my minimal makeup applied with care. Armor for the evening ahead. Through the restaurant windows, I watched my family arrive. My parents pulled up in my father's new luxury sedan, my mother emerging in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. My brother arrived separately in his own high-end car, a graduation gift from our parents. My Aunt Margaret, the judge, came with her husband, both looking like they had stepped from the pages of a society magazine. Cousin Patrick brought his new girlfriend, a pediatric surgeon who would undoubtedly fit right into the family success narrative. The hostess led each arrival to our private room, where greetings were exchanged with the particular blend of criticism and affection that characterized our family interactions. "Hilda, you look nice," my mother said, her eyes doing a quick assessment. "Though you might want to consider highlights, they would brighten your complexion. Your cousin Amanda says her colorist works miracles." Before I could respond, my Aunt Margaret joined us. "Still keeping your hair short, I see. Bold choice for a woman your age." My father greeted me with a quick cheek kiss that felt like a formality. "The traffic must have been terrible from your side of town," he said, though I had actually been the first to arrive. As we took our seats, the familiar choreography began. My father at the head of the table, my mother to his right, Jackson to his left, the positions of honor. I sat further down between my aunt and cousin Patrick's girlfriend, the newcomers to the family circle. The first course had barely been served when the probing questions began. "So Hilda, anyone special in your life yet?" My mother asked this while delicately cutting into her appetizer, as if inquiring about the weather. "Not currently," I replied, the practiced answer to a question that appeared at every family gathering. "Well, you know what they say," my Aunt Margaret chimed in, "career women often find it challenging to balance relationships. Though Amanda manages both a surgical residency and planning her wedding." Amanda, of course, was another cousin whose accomplishments were regularly used as measuring sticks against my own life. "I am focusing on growing my client base right now," I offered, attempting to steer the conversation toward my work. "Actually, I just landed a contract with North Star Technologies last week." My mother nodded vaguely, while my father had already turned his attention to Jackson, who was describing his latest rotation in cardiothoracic surgery. "Dad, you should have seen it," Jackson was saying, animated in a way I rarely got to be at these gatherings. Dr. Lewis let me assist on a valve replacement. He said my suturing technique was exceptional for a resident. My father beamed pride radiating from him like physical warmth. That is exactly where I started showing promise too. The precision required for those procedures separates the merely good from the exceptional surgeons. The main course arrived momentarily, pausing the conversation. I took the opportunity to try again. The North Star project is actually pretty exciting, I said, directing my comment toward my cousin Patrick, who might appreciate the business significance, even if he did not understand the design aspects. They want a complete digital rebrand, which means redesigning everything from their website to their app interface and internal communication systems. My mother looked up. Is that the software company near downtown? I sold the CEO his house last year. Beautiful property on Mercer Island. For a moment, I felt a flicker of connection. Yes, that is them. It was actually a competitive bid situation, and they chose my proposal over several larger agencies. My father cleared his throat, steering the conversation in a new direction. Speaking of competitive situations, Jackson, tell everyone about the research fellowship you have been invited to apply for. And just like that, my moment was gone. The conversation flowed back to its natural course. Jackson's achievements, my parents' successes, my aunt's recent high-profile case, Patrick's expanding business ventures. The familiar rhythm of family dynamics played out over expensive food and fine wine. As dessert was being served, my father tapped his glass for attention. Everyone quieted, expecting the traditional birthday speech about gratitude and family legacy. As I look around this table, he began his surgeon's hands gesturing to encompass everyone. I see the culmination of the Anderson family values. Excellence, dedication, meaningful contribution. He nodded toward my mother. Diana has built a business that shapes our community, creating homes and opportunities. His gaze shifted to my brother. Jackson is following the path of healing, preparing to save lives and advance medical knowledge. My aunt received her acknowledgement next. Margaret upholds justice and the rule of law, making society better through her wisdom. I waited for my turn for some acknowledgement of my work, my independence, anything that would include me in this narrative of family excellence. But my father's gaze passed over me as he continued highlighting others at the table. When he finally finished, I seized the momentary silence. Dad, I wanted to share some news too. The North Star contract I mentioned is actually the largest single client my firm has ever taken on, and I will be leading the entire creative direction. He looked at me with an expression I had seen countless times, a mixture of impatience and puzzlement, as if trying to solve the riddle of how I had emerged from his genetic material. Jackson will save lives, he said, his tone dismissive. Your mother builds our community, and what do? Draw pictures on computers. He shook his head slightly. You are the most useless child we have. The table fell silent. My mother's lips curved into a slight, uncomfortable smile, while Jackson poorly concealed a smirk behind his wine glass. My Aunt Margaret suddenly found her dessert fascinating while Cousin Patrick stared at his lap. His girlfriend, new to our family dynamics, had the decency to look shocked. In that moment, something inside me that had been stretched to its breaking point for 28 years finally snapped. But instead of the tears or angry outburst everyone might have expected, I felt a strange calm wash over me, like slipping into cool water on a scorching day. I carefully placed my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and looked my father directly in the eyes. Then I did something that confused everyone at the table. I smiled. Not a hurt smile, not a passive-aggressive smile, but a genuine one that came from a place of sudden, unexpected freedom. Without a word, I picked up my designer handbag, nodded politely to the table, and walked out of the private dining room. I moved through the restaurant with measured steps past the hostess, who asked if everything was all right, and out into the cool Seattle evening. In my car, I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply started the engine, pulled away from the restaurant, and drove into the night with no destination in mind, feeling for the first time in years like I could finally breathe. The Seattle skyline glittered in my rearview mirror as I drove with no particular destination. The rhythmic swish of windshield wipers clearing the light rain became meditative, matching the strange calm that had settled over me. My phone began buzzing with notifications almost immediately after I left the restaurant, but I ignored it, tossing it onto the passenger seat where its screen illuminated and darkened like a mechanical firefly. As I drove, memories surfaced and receded like waves. My father missing my high school art exhibition because a colleague had invited him to a medical conference. My mother's distracted congratulations when I graduated with honors, her attention divided between my ceremony and a potential client calling her cell phone. The Christmas when Jackson received a new laptop for his pre-med studies while I unwrapped a generic gift card. 1,000 small moments of being overlooked, undervalued, misunderstood. Each memory should have stung, but instead they seemed to be floating away from me, losing their power with each mile I drove. The realization hit me with startling clarity. I was never the problem. No amount of achievement would ever be enough because the issue was not my worth but their inability to see it. After nearly 2 hours of aimless driving, I found myself in a small coastal town north of the city. A 24-hour cafe called the Night Owl glowed warmly against the darkness, and on impulse, I pulled into its nearly empty parking lot. Inside, the scent of coffee and baked goods wrapped around me like a blanket. The place was mostly empty, except for a couple in a corner booth and a young woman reading a book at the counter. Just one asked the server, a woman about my age, with vibrant blue hair and kind eyes. Her name tag read Lauren. Yes, I replied, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, as if I had not used it for days instead of hours. She led me to a window booth where I could watch the raindrops race down the glass, the streetlights turning them into streaks of gold. I ordered coffee and pie almost automatically, then stared out at the quiet street beyond the window. "Rough night?" Lauren asked when she returned with my order. There was no prying in her tone, just gentle recognition from someone who had likely witnessed many late-night emotional refugees in her cafe. I surprised myself by answering honestly. My father just told me I am the most useless child they have at his birthday dinner. In front of the entire family. Lauren winced. That is harsh. Mind if I sit for a minute? We are slow, and my manager is cool about breaks when there are no customers waiting. I gestured to the empty seat across from me, and she slid in, pushing my pie a little closer to me encouragingly. Parents can really do a number on us, right? She said, tucking a strand of blue hair behind her ear. Mine disowned me when I came out at 19, told me not to come back until I was normal again. I am so sorry, I said, genuinely moved by her casual sharing of such pain. She shrugged. It was 8 years ago now. I made my own family after that. Found people who love me for who I am, not who they wanted me to be. She studied me for a moment. You have that look, you know. The one people get when they are finally seeing things clearly for the first time. I think I am, I admitted. I just walked out, did not cry, did not argue, just left. Lauren nodded approvingly. Good for you. First time I stood up to my dad, my knees were shaking so bad I thought I would fall over. But you know what? That was the beginning of actually living my life instead of just surviving it. We talked for nearly an hour, this stranger and I, sharing stories of family disappointments and small rebellions. She told me about building a life without her parents' support, about the chosen family of friends who showed up for her birthdays and holidays, about meeting her girlfriend whose parents welcomed Lauren as a daughter. I told her about years of seeking approval that never came of achievements dismissed and passions belittled. As the conversation wound down, Lauren brought me a fresh cup of coffee on the house. What will you do now? She asked. My phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout our conversation. I finally glanced at it. 15 missed calls from my mother, 7 from my brother, 3 from my father, and a flurry of text messages expressing escalating concern and anger. First, I am turning this off, I said, powering down the phone completely. The silence that followed felt sacred. After Lauren returned to work, I sat in that booth until nearly 3 in the morning, doing something I had not done in years, I wrote. Using the cafe's branded paper napkins and a pen borrowed from Lauren, I began to journal my thoughts, my feelings, my realizations. The words poured out of me messy and raw and honest. I wrote about the little girl who used to show her drawings to parents who glanced at them with distracted smiles. I wrote about the teenager who stopped sharing her dreams because they were never taken seriously. I wrote about the adult who had built a successful career that brought her joy and fulfillment, but who still measured herself through her family's dismissive eyes. By the time I had filled a dozen napkins with my cramped handwriting, I knew I needed a plan. I could not go home, not yet. I needed space and time to process this rupture, to decide what came next. Using the cafe's Wi-Fi, I booked a room at a modest hotel nearby. Then I composed a brief professional email to my 3 most important clients, explaining that I would be taking an unexpected but brief personal leave and would be back in touch within the week. I set an auto-reply on my work email with similar information. As dawn approached, I made one final decision. I booked a flight to Portland for the following afternoon to stay with my best friend Tara, the one person who had always seen me clearly and valued me fully. When I finally checked into the hotel as the sun was rising, I collapsed onto the bed with an exhaustion that went bone deep, but it was not the familiar exhaustion of trying to prove my worth. It was the weariness that comes after shedding a heavy burden you have carried so long you forgot it was not part of your body. For the first time in my adult life, I fell asleep without wondering what my family would think about my choices, my accomplishments, my existence. In that anonymous hotel room with its generic artwork and stiff sheets, I began to reclaim myself from the narrative they had written for me. I woke to late morning sunlight filtering through thin hotel curtains. For a moment, I was disoriented. The unfamiliar room coming into focus slowly. Then the events of the previous night crashed back, and I reached instinctively for my phone, powering it on with a mixture of dread and curiosity. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications so intense that the phone vibrated continuously for nearly 30 seconds. 53 missed calls, 87 text messages, 12 voicemails, emails, social media messages from relatives. My mother's texts showed a clear progression through the night, 10:15 p.m. This is completely inappropriate behavior. Return to the restaurant immediately. 10:45 p.m. Your father is very upset. You are ruining his birthday. 11:30 p.m. Hilda, this has gone far enough. Where are you? 12:15 a.m. We are worried. Please just let us know you are safe. 1:30 a.m. We have called all your friends. No one knows where you are. Please call 3:00 a.m. Hilda, I am begging you. Just text back that you are alive. 5:45 a.m. We are considering calling the police. Please stop this. My brother's messages followed a similar arc, starting with irritation 10:20 p.m. Way to make a scene. Dad is furious. 10:50 p.m. Mom is freaking out. Just come back already. 1:45 p.m. This is ridiculous. You are acting like a child. But by early morning, even his tone had shifted. 2:30 a.m. Hilda, seriously, we are worried. No one has heard from you. 4:15 a.m. I have checked with 3 hospitals. Please just text someone. 6:00 a.m. This is not like you. Please be okay. The voicemails captured their voices growing increasingly frantic. My mother crying. My father's controlled surgeon's voice cracking slightly. My brother, sounding younger than I had heard him in years. Most surprising was my father's single text message sent at 5:57 a.m. containing just one word, please. I sat cross-legged on the hotel bed, scrolling through this digital evidence of panic, feeling strangely detached. They were worried, yes, but I could not help wondering. Were they concerned for me or for the disruption to their perfectly controlled world? Was this about my safety, or about the fact that for once I had not followed their script? After careful consideration, I composed a single 3-word response and sent it to my father's phone, knowing it would be shared with everyone. Useless is busy. Then I silenced the phone again, placed it on the nightstand, and went to take the longest, hottest shower the hotel plumbing would allow. Under the steaming water, I laughed until tears came the words I had sent, bringing a fierce joy I had rarely experienced. 3 hours later, I was on a flight to Portland, watching Seattle disappear beneath the clouds. My phone remained off, tucked into the depths of my bag. Whatever crisis my absence had created in the Anderson family would continue without my participation. Tara met me at the Portland airport with a hug that felt like coming home. My oldest friend from art school, she had always been my refuge from family stress. She had heard the condensed version of events via text before my flight, but wanted the full story. "Holy shit, Hilda," she said as we settled into her apartment that evening, cups of tea steaming between us. "You actually just walked out on the mighty Andersons. I need every single detail." I recounted the previous night's events, finding that each retelling made the experience less painful and more empowering. Tara listened with appropriate outrage and support, occasionally interjecting with colorful commentary about my family's treatment of me over the years. "You know this has been a long time coming, right?" she said when I finished. "The way they dismiss your work, your passion, your entire existence has never been okay. I think part of me always knew I admitted. But when you grow up in it, that kind of dismissal becomes normal. You start believing maybe they are right about you." "Well, they are not," Tara stated firmly. "You are crazy, talented, financially independent, and emotionally intelligent, which is more than I can say for them. The fact that you create, rather than cut people open, does not make you less valuable to society." Over the next few days, Tara introduced me to her circle of friends, many of whom shared their own stories of family estrangement or boundary setting. Melissa, a software engineer, had not spoken to her emotionally abusive mother in 3 years. Kai had limited contact with parents who never accepted their career change from law to nonprofit work. James maintained a carefully choreographed relationship with family, who still would not acknowledge his husband of 5 years. Each conversation illuminated another piece of what I was experiencing. I was not alone in this struggle. Others had walked this path and found their way to healthier relationships, either with new boundaries in place, or by creating distance where necessary. Between these social connections, I spent hours researching family dynamics and emotional abuse. I learned about gaslighting, where reality is manipulated until you doubt your own perceptions. I recognized the pattern of diminishment that had characterized my family's treatment of me. I came across the concept of the family scapegoat, the member who carries the blame for family dysfunction, and felt a shock of recognition. Most importantly, I found validation that my accomplishments were significant and worthy. Design was not just drawing pictures on computers, but a crucial form of communication that shaped how people interacted with brands, information, and each other. My work had tangible impact on businesses and users. The skills I had cultivated were valuable and respected in my industry, even if my family could not see their worth. On my 5th day in Portland, I finally turned my phone back on for longer than a quick check. The barrage had slowed but not stopped. My mother had progressed to lengthy emotional appeals about family loyalty. My brother had sent several surprisingly reflective messages acknowledging that our father's comment had been out of line, but still urging me to be the bigger person. My father's communications were fewer but more revealing. After his initial pleas, he had sent only 3 additional messages. Day 2, "Your mother is not sleeping. Come home." Day 3, "This behavior is beneath you." Day 4, "We need to talk like adults." No apology. No acknowledgement of the harm his words had caused, just the expectation that I would eventually return to my assigned role in the family system. That night, after Tara had gone to bed, I sat on her balcony under the stars and made my decision. I would return to Seattle, to my life and my work, but not to the old patterns. If my family wanted a relationship with me, it would be on new terms with clear boundaries and expectations of respect. I fell asleep that night with a plan, forming a sense of purpose, replacing the hurt that had driven me out into the night less than a week before. The next morning, I booked my return flight to Seattle and scheduled an appointment with a therapist Tara had recommended who specialized in family trauma. It was time to go home, not as the Hilda who had walked out of that restaurant, but as someone new, someone who had finally recognized her own value, independent of her family's assessment. My return to Seattle felt like stepping into a familiar room where all the furniture had been subtly rearranged. Everything looked the same, but I navigated the space differently. My apartment, my workspace, my routines remained unchanged, but I moved through them with a newfound awareness, like waking from a long sleep. The day after my return, I met with Dr. Julia Winters, the therapist Tara had recommended. Her office was warm and unpretentious, with plants thriving on every available surface and art that spoke of healing and growth. So she said, after I had given her the condensed version of recent events, "You have had a significant awakening about your family dynamics. What do you want to do with that insight?" "I need to confront them," I said. "Not in anger, but with clarity. I cannot go back to the way things were, but I am not ready to cut them off completely either." Dr. Winters nodded. "That sounds reasonable. What would a healthy relationship with your family look like to you?" I considered this carefully. One where my work and choices are respected even if they do not understand them. Where comparisons to my brother or cousins stop. Where I am valued for who I am, not constantly measured against who they think I should be. "Those are excellent boundaries," she said. "Now, let us talk about how to communicate them effectively, and more importantly, how to enforce them when they are inevitably tested." Over the next 2 sessions, Dr. Winters helped me prepare for a confrontation with my family. We role-played potential scenarios, anticipated defensive reactions, and practiced calm responses. I compiled specific examples of harmful patterns, moving beyond generalized complaints to concrete incidents that could not be easily dismissed. Remember, Dr. Winters advised in our final preparation session, they will try to pull you back into old dynamics. They may minimize your feelings, change the subject, or make you the problem for being too sensitive. Your job is to stay centered in your truth without becoming defensive. When I felt adequately prepared, I texted my parents suggesting we meet at my apartment the following Sunday afternoon. Neutral territory, I reasoned, where I could control the environment and they would be visitors rather than authority figures. They agreed immediately, clearly relieved that I was finally willing to engage. That Sunday arrived with a clarity that seemed symbolic. The persistent Seattle rain had paused, leaving the air washed clean, and the sky a rare, uninterrupted blue. I had prepared my apartment, carefully arranging the living room seating to create a balanced dynamic rather than allowing my parents to sit together facing me like judges at a tribunal. I placed a pitcher of water and glasses on the coffee table, but no food or other refreshments that might turn this into a social occasion. At precisely 2 o'clock, my doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, centering myself in the calm strength I had been cultivating, and opened the door. The 3 of them stood in the hallway, a familiar family unit now strange to me. My father looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. My mother had clearly taken extraordinary care with her appearance, perhaps thinking she could restore normalcy through perfect makeup and hair. My brother stood slightly behind them, his expression guarded. "Hilda," my mother breathed, moving to embrace me. I accepted the hug briefly, but stepped back before she could linger. "Please come in," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you for coming." They entered my apartment with the slightly uncomfortable air of people visiting a foreign country, noticing the artwork on my walls, the books on my shelves, as if seeing evidence of my separate life for the first time. Once we were seated, my father cleared his throat, clearly preparing to take control of the conversation as he had done all my life. I spoke first, gently but firmly, interrupting whatever he had planned to say. "I want to thank you all for coming today," I began. "I know the past week has been difficult and concerning for you, and I apologize for causing worry about my safety. That was not my intention." My mother leaned forward. "Hilda, we have been absolutely frantic. You cannot just disappear like that. We thought something terrible had happened. I understand that now," I acknowledged. "And I am truly sorry for the fear my silence caused. But I needed that time away to process what happened and to gain clarity on our relationship going forward." My father's posture shifted, his surgeon's authority reasserting itself. "Hilda, if this is about what I said at the dinner, it was a momentary lapse in judgment. We were celebrating, I had had a glass of wine, and I spoke without thinking. Surely you are not going to throw away your family over one unfortunate comment." This was exactly what Dr. Winters had prepared me for: the minimization, the framing of my reaction as disproportionate. "Dad, what you said at dinner was painful, yes. But it was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as less valuable because my talents and interests do not match what you value." My brother shifted uncomfortably. My mother's eyes widened. "That is simply not true," my father protested. "We have always supported you." "You supported what you thought I should be, not who I am," I corrected gently. "Let me give you some examples." Calmly, without accusation in my tone, I began to list specific incidents: the missed art exhibitions, the dismissive comments about my career, the constant comparisons to Jackson and my cousins, the way my professional accomplishments were treated as cute hobbies, while my brother's achievements were celebrated as significant contributions. As I spoke, I watched their faces cycle through defensiveness, confusion, and, in my mother's case, the dawning of uncomfortable recognition. "We paid for your education," my father interjected when I paused. "We have always provided for you." "Yes, you did," I acknowledged. "And I am grateful for that financial support. But emotional support, validation, respect for my choices, those have been consistently withheld or offered conditionally." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We only want what is best for you, Hilda. We worry about your future, your security." "I understand that you care in your way," I said. "But I need you to understand something fundamental. I am happy with my life. I am successful in my field. I find my work fulfilling and meaningful. And I need you to respect that, even if it is not the path you would have chosen for me." My brother, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "You are really good at what you do, Hilda. I have seen your portfolio website. That stuff is impressive, even if I do not understand all the technical aspects." This unexpected support momentarily threw me, but I recovered quickly. "Thank you, Jackson. That means a lot to me." My father stood up abruptly and walked to my window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. His back was rigid with tension. "What exactly do you want from us, Hilda?" This was the opening I had been waiting for. "I want a relationship with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Going forward, these are my non-negotiable expectations." I outlined my boundaries clearly. No more dismissive comments about my career choice, genuine interest in my accomplishments, an end to comparisons with other family members, an acknowledgement of my value as an individual, separate from their expectations. "And I need an apology," I concluded. "Not just for what happened at the birthday dinner, but for the pattern of dismissal that has characterized our relationship for years." My father turned from the window, his expression a complex mixture of frustration, confusion, and something that might have been grudging respect. "And if we cannot meet these expectations, then I will need to limit my contact with you until you can." I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "I value our family, but not at the cost of my self-worth." My mother began to cry in earnest now. "But we are your parents, Hilda. You cannot just cut us off because we are not perfect." "I am not asking for perfection, Mom. I am asking for basic respect and acknowledgement of who I actually am, not who you wish I was." The conversation continued for nearly 3 hours, cycling through defensive arguments, emotional appeals, and occasional moments of genuine connection. My father struggled the most, his worldview so firmly established that he seemed unable to see past it. My mother fluctuated between tearful pleas about family bonds and brief glimpses of understanding. My brother surprised me with his support, occasionally validating my perspective even as he tried to mediate. By the time they left, we had reached no firm resolution. My father departed with a stiff hug and a promise to consider what you have said. My mother clung to me at the door, extracting a promise that I would answer her calls going forward. Jackson hung back after our parents had gone down to the car. "I am sorry," he said simply. "I never realized how much it hurt you the way they compared us. And I have probably been just as bad. That comment Dad made at dinner, it was cruel and you did not deserve it." His unexpected apology nearly broke the composure I had maintained all afternoon. "Thank you, Jackson. That means a lot." "I will talk to them," he promised. "Not that they listen to me about everything, but maybe they will hear it differently coming from me." After they left, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as Dr. Winters had predicted, with all the defensive tactics and emotional manipulation she had prepared me for. But I had held my ground, stated my needs clearly, and set boundaries that felt right to me. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time I was not allowing my family to determine my value or dictate my choices. Whatever happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. The weeks following the confrontation unfolded in ways both expected and surprising. My father, true to his nature, responded first with anger. He left a terse voicemail 3 days after our meeting. "I have thought about your accusations and find them overblown. Families are not democracies, Hilda. Parents guide children for good reason." My mother took a different approach, sending daily text messages that alternated between guilt trips. "This is breaking your father's heart," and awkward attempts to connect on my terms. "I looked up your company website today. The colors are very nice." Most unexpected was my brother's evolution. Jackson called me for coffee the following weekend, something he had rarely done before. "I have been thinking about what you said," he admitted, as we sat at a small cafe near my apartment, "about always being compared. And I realized something uncomfortable, Hilda. I benefited from that comparison. It felt good being the successful child." His self-awareness surprised me. "That is natural," I said. "Anyone would enjoy that position." Maybe he conceded. "But I should have noticed what it was doing to you. And I should have said something when Dad made that comment at dinner." This tentative reconnection with Jackson became a bright spot in the aftermath. We began texting regularly, sharing details of our days without the competitive undercurrent that had always characterized our interactions. He sent me articles about design that he thought might interest me. I asked questions about his residency that went beyond polite small talk. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my professional life with new energy. The week away had given me perspective not just on my family relationships, but on my career aspirations. I had been playing it safe, working for established firms, rather than taking the entrepreneurial leap I had always contemplated. 2 months after the birthday dinner incident, I gave notice at my design agency and launched Anderson Creative, my own boutique design studio. The irony of keeping the family name for my business was not lost on me, but it felt like reclaiming something that was rightfully mine as much as theirs. The timing proved fortunate. The North Star Technologies project that my family had dismissed became the cornerstone of my new business. Their complete digital rebrand was so successful that their CEO referred me to 2 other technology companies in his network. By the end of my 3rd month as an independent studio, I had hired 2 junior designers to help manage the workload. In June, Western Design magazine featured my work in their Innovators Under 30 section, with a 2-page spread showcasing the North Star rebrand. I sent copies to my parents and brother without comment. Jackson called immediately to congratulate me. My mother sent a text saying she had shown the magazine to her bridge club. My father did not respond directly, but my mother mentioned that he had left the magazine open on his desk, the page marked with one of his surgical journals. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. My personal growth paralleled my professional evolution. Weekly sessions with Dr. Winters helped me process decades of family dynamics and develop healthier patterns of self-validation. I began to recognize how deeply I had internalized my family's assessment of my worth, and how that had influenced everything from my friendships to my romantic relationships. "You tend to overfunction in relationships," Dr. Winters observed during one session. "You work harder to prove your value to be indispensable, because you are afraid of being found useless or dispensable, just as you felt in your family." This insight illuminated patterns in my failed relationships that I had never connected to my family experience. I had always been the one putting in more effort, anticipating needs, making myself essential to partners who often took my contributions for granted. Armed with this awareness, I approached dating differently. I met Eric, a landscape architect, at a mutual friend's gallery opening. Unlike previous relationships where I had rushed to demonstrate my value, I allowed this connection to develop, slowly maintaining my boundaries and observing how he respected them. When Eric asked about my family after we had been dating for a month, I shared the condensed version of recent events. His response cemented my growing feelings for him. "That took incredible courage," he said, his expression serious. Standing up for yourself like that, most people never get there. His own family, I learned, was supportive of his creative career in ways mine had never been. Watching their interactions at a dinner I was invited to was like observing an alternate universe, where parents celebrated their children's unique paths, rather than trying to reshape them. The contrast was educational, showing me what healthy family dynamics could look like. It also underscored that my expectations for respect and validation were not unreasonable or excessive, as my father had implied. Meanwhile, my social circle expanded beyond the work connections that had dominated my pre-confrontation life. I joined a community of independent creative professionals who met monthly to share resources and support. Through them, I connected with other designers, photographers, writers, and artists who understood the challenges and rewards of creative careers in ways my family never had. These new friendships provided validation and perspective that had been missing in my life. When I shared my family's dismissal of my work as just drawing pictures on computers, the group responded with knowing laughter and their own stories of having their creative work minimized by non-creative people. "My uncle still asks when I am going to get a real job," laughed Sophia, a successful illustrator whose work appeared regularly in national magazines. "I just show him my bank statements now." This community became another kind of family, one based on shared values and mutual respect, rather than genetic connection. We celebrated each other's successes, offered support during creative blocks, and provided honest feedback that came from a place of understanding the work itself. 6 months after the confrontation, my relationship with my family had settled into a new pattern. My mother and I spoke weekly with conversations that remained somewhat superficial but were no longer dominated by comparisons or subtle criticisms. She made visible efforts to ask about my work, though her questions often revealed how little she understood what I actually did. My father maintained a certain distance, but the outright dismissal had been replaced by a grudging acknowledgement that I was at least supporting myself successfully. When my studio won a regional design award, he sent a brief but unprecedented email. "Congratulations on your recognition. Your grandfather would be proud of your entrepreneurial spirit." It was not the wholehearted validation I might have wished for, but it represented significant movement from a man whose worldview had remained largely unchanged for 60 years. My brother became an unexpected ally in this new family configuration. During family interactions, he gently redirected conversations when they veered toward old patterns, highlighted my accomplishments when they were overlooked, and occasionally called out our parents directly when they slipped into comparative language. "Dad," he said during a rare dinner together, "Hilda's business growth this year is just as impressive as my research publication. Different fields, equal achievements." The look of surprise on my father's face was matched only by the grateful one on mine. As the 1-year anniversary of the fateful birthday dinner approached, I realized how much had changed both within me and in my external life. I had built a successful business, developed healthier relationships, and established boundaries that protected my sense of self. The hurt child seeking validation had been replaced by a confident woman who could acknowledge her family's limitations without being diminished by them. The journey was far from complete, but for the first time in my adult life, I was moving forward on a path of my own, choosing one step at a time. 1 year after the dinner that changed everything, I found myself preparing for another family gathering. My father's 61st birthday would be celebrated not at Maison Laurent, but at my parents' home, a concession to my request for a more intimate setting without the pressure of public performance. As I dressed for the evening, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused, struck by the visible changes a year had wrought. The woman looking back at me stood straighter, her eyes clearer, her smile more genuine. I wore a dress in my favorite bold color rather than the safe black I had always chosen for family events, a small but significant declaration of selfhood. The drive to my parents' suburban home felt different too. Where once anxiety would have built with each mile now, I felt a calm readiness. My boundaries were established. I knew my worth independent of their assessment. Whatever happened tonight, I would leave intact. My mother greeted me with her usual critical embrace, though I noticed her criticism had shifted from my appearance to my punctuality. "Always cutting it close," she said, though I had arrived exactly at the time specified in her invitation. Some patterns would likely never change completely. Inside, the gathering was smaller than last year's restaurant extravaganza. Only my parents, Jackson, and his new girlfriend, Kate, my Aunt Margaret, and her husband and me. The reduced audience already made the evening feel less like a performance. My father accepted my birthday gift, a rare first edition medical text I had tracked down through a collector with something approaching genuine pleasure. "This is thoughtful, Hilda," he said, examining the volume carefully. "Very appropriate." Coming from him, it was high praise. Dinner proceeded with the usual family dynamics, though I noticed subtle shifts. When my mother began a story that compared Jackson's and my childhood achievements, my brother smoothly redirected the conversation. When my aunt asked about my little design business, my father surprised everyone by saying, "Hilda's studio has had quite a successful year." That technology company rebrand was featured in a design publication. His awkward but sincere attempt to acknowledge my work nearly made me drop my fork in shock. Later, as dessert was being served, my father cleared his throat in the way that traditionally signaled a pronouncement. The echo of last year's devastating comment hung in the air between us. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began formally. "Family gatherings have a different meaning for me now than they did a year ago." His eyes met mine briefly before continuing. "Life does not always follow the path we envision. As a surgeon, I learned that adaptability is sometimes more valuable than perfect execution of a plan." It was as close to an acknowledgement of his changed perspective as I was likely to get. I nodded slightly, accepting the olive branch for what it was. After dinner, while others moved to the living room for coffee, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother, as she prepared a tray. "Your business seems to be doing well," she said, arranging cups with her usual precision. "It is," I replied. "We just signed our 10th major client last week." She nodded, focusing on the cream pitcher. "I may not understand what you do exactly, but I can see it makes you happy. That is what matters in the end, I suppose." Coming from a woman who had spent decades prioritizing achievement and appearance over happiness, this represented a seismic shift in worldview. "Thank you, Mom," I said simply. "It does make me happy." The evening ended without drama or revelation, just a family gathering that felt marginally more comfortable than those that had come before. As I drove home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The healing had not been linear or complete. There had been setbacks along the way, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, times when I doubted the possibility of real change. But progress, however incremental, was undeniable. I had learned that sometimes walking away is the only path forward. That one moment of standing firm can alter dynamics built over decades. That boundaries once established and consistently maintained can gradually reshape even the most entrenched relationships. Most importantly, I had discovered that my worth was never dependent on their validation. The success I had built, the relationships I had formed, the life I had created, all of these had value inherent to themselves, not bestowed by parental approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. "How did it go?" "Better than expected," I replied. "Tell you all about it tomorrow." My life now extended far beyond the narrow confines of family expectation. I had built connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I had found love with someone who saw and celebrated my authentic self. I had created work that brought me fulfillment and recognition in my field. The wounded child who had walked out of that restaurant a year ago had grown into a woman who could engage with her family from a place of strength rather than need. I could love them flawed as they were without requiring them to be different. I could accept their limitations without being limited by them. The Anderson family would never be a Hallmark movie version of supportive bliss. My father would likely always value traditional achievement over creative contribution. My mother would probably never fully understand the work I did. But within those constraints, we had found a way to remain connected without my sacrificing my sense of self. As I settled into my apartment that night, I thought of all the viewers who might be watching this story, recognizing their own family wounds in mine. I wondered how many were still caught in the cycle of seeking approval that would never come of trying to prove their worth to people incapable of seeing it. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to preserve your sense of self? Did you ever find the courage to set boundaries with family who diminished you? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in these struggles is the first step toward healing. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding strength after family wounds. Share with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by those who cannot see it clearly. Thank you for witnessing my story. May you find the courage to write your own with or without the approval of those who should have loved you best.